Hello, my name is Nathan Balls. I'm the Regional Manager for Petrosys in Europe. Petrosys are now reselling FaultRisk Workstation, which is developed by FaultSeal. The application's been on the market for the past 6 years or so, and there's clients such as Chevron, Repsol, Petronas and Baker Hughes. What we're going to do today is show how FaultRisk works by going through the cool Jaloo prospect in the Perth Basin and give you a bit of a background of what it does. For those of you not familiar with Petrosys, we're working primarily with mapping and surface modeling data. When we integrate that with the stratigraphy and fault risk, we can produce oil water and gas water contacts, the probability of fault sealing, and we can also create Allan maps and generate BRV, bulk rock volume volumetrics. The key benefit to working with fault risk, it gives us a real good prospect risking, working out which leads which will become prospects. It also helps reservoir modeling and history matching to look at brown fields and older fields as they start to reach the end of their life due to the water contacts moving up and getting smaller compartments and attic oil becoming important. In fault seal analysis or trap analysis, there's a wide range of ways people think about faults through the life cycle of a field. At first they want faults to leak, as they want hydrocarbons to come out of the basins, and then they want the faults to seal or act as a trap. At the same time, they don't want all the small faults to seal because then they're going to have problems with producing the fields. So one of the key issues we deal with on a day-to-day basis is uncertainty around the geometry of faults. Is there actually a fault there or not? Then once we know if there's a fault there, knowing which faults will seal and which ones will leak. One of the things that FaultSeal has found from its consulting business, looking at many thousands of faults around the world, is that juxtaposition analysis, or working out which sand-on-sand juxtaposition occur, is key in understanding what and how hydrocarbons are trapped. So what FaultRisk does is to take into account the uncertainty and then calculates the probability of a fault sealing and the range of volumes trapped in any prospect. There are a lot of uncertainties around the fault and how it seals or not. There's often poor imaging around the fault. In general, we don't know much about the downthrown side of a fault because we don't drill wells there. And the problem is this is the area we have to understand if we want to know about the fault geometries and if a fault is going to seal or not. The other thing to consider is that in general in seismic we don't see the reservoir. The thief zones and seals and reservoirs that we're concerned with are all below seismic resolution. So we need to model, using Monte Carlo simulation, the uncertainty of a fault geometry. Model the throw in particular, and the shape of the fault, the thickness and growth and the erosion of the unit. So these geologic factors, the sub-seismic issues and the fault geometry issues all come into play and will have a big impact on whether or not the fault will seal. Ideally, what we're looking at in fault seal analysis is we want first degree seal. We want to know where the sand juxtaposes against the shale. So here we have the A sand juxtaposes against the number 1 shale, and the B sand juxtaposes against the B sand. So there's a high chance that B sand will leak, so we'll need some sort of second degree seal or membrane seal for this to seal. Commonly used algorithm in the industry is the shale gauge ratio. This is implemented in fault risk. However, the experts at FaultSeal have found that it tends to massively overestimate the seal capacity. Nonetheless, the customers want it, so we've implemented it. To put it simply, how it works, it says that for any one point in the footwall, what sediments have moved past, and of those sediments, what proportion moving past was shale. It's also important to understand Allan maps or Allan diagrams. These Allan maps are slightly complicated, but they're not fundamentally difficult to understand. Here we have an upper sand and a lower sand, and on the other side of the fault, or the downthrown side of the fault, we have the same upper and lower sand. If you take a cross-section at the position of maximum throw, what we see is we end up describing the juxtaposition of, in this case, sand on shale. As you move along the fault, we have a more complicated juxtaposition to represent. So if we assume that sand on sand juxtaposition leaks, we can use the upper sand. We can see the upper sand will trap a much larger column than the lower sand. And working out these fault plane diagrams is a key factor in fault seal analysis. What FaultRisk does is to integrate the Allan map and the fault plane profiles to come up with a prospect analysis method that's quick and easy to use. So here's an example of some Allan diagrams from a prospect showing sand juxtaposition in this case here. For our prospect, what we have is the Cool prospect. What we see here is the crest of the prospect, the spill point down here, and the trap. The map is based on a fine grid of 2D seismic, which has come from Petrosys, and the key element that we're going to look at is this fault. Is the fault going to seal or not? And if so, where's the spill point? We're going to calculate bulk rock volume and compare that to normal methods used for risking to see how FaultRisk does things. One of the key things early on to look at is how good is the fault interpretation. If you have a geologically impossible fault, how can we have a sensible fault seal calculation? So in this diagram, what we see is we have the upthrown and downthrown sides of the fault, and the throw is contoured. So you have the maximum throw displacement at the center of the fault, and the displacement will decrease out to the tip. So if you look at the difference between the upthrown and downthrown sides, you end up with this displacement profile, and it's in the shape of a inverted parabola. You can then use this parabola to analyze how well a fault polygon compares to that parabola to assess the integrity of the fault interpretation. So we can use length throw ratios. Faults that are abnormally long with low throws are likely to have issues as interpreters miscorrelate them, or maybe they're joining together, have two faults together. How this is manifests itself in the displacement profile is this sort of thing here, where we see that we have a fault with two central maximum displacements, and we end up with this compound parabolic shape instead of the nice simple shape up here. And where the low is here, it tends to give us an idea that genetically they might have separate faults, or maybe that an interpreter is miscorrelated. So there may be a problem with this fault here. So here's the fault from the Cool prospect viewed in FaultRisk Workstation. There's two views. The first one, the fault polygon we're getting from Petrosys. This one has the upthrown and downthrown sides of the faults. And in the second window, we have the displacement profile. So here we see the profile, the grey profile is a displacement profile for this. As you can see, it's got this sort of compound parabola rather than the theoretical profile here. So this might suggest that this fault may be two faults, but what we can see here is this has given us a better fault interpretation, and it also calculates all the key parameters we use in FaultRisk. FaultRisk uses the idea that we really understand the footwall best, and the throw is the thing that's probably fairly poorly constrained. So we're going to anchor ourselves on the footwall, and in the Monte Carlo simulation we're going to vary the amount of throw, the length of the fault, the position of maximum throw, where that position is, and also we'll truncate the fault if the fault's truncated, whether it's due to the trap not extending that far or whether there are more than one fault joined together. This is our fault in this prospect. We have about 200 meters of throw, so this is the FaultRisk input data. In the stratigraphic section that we're looking at, the L sand is the sand we're most interested in, which is this sand here. And the key factor we're concerned about is this K-shale above. How thick is the K-shale? If the fault exceeds the thickness of the K-shale, then the L sand will juxtapose against the J sand. There'll be communication across the fault, and it will leak hydrocarbons. So you can see in here the K-shale is around 200 meters thick. So as we vary the K-shale thickness, we're going to work out the probability of there being a trap and the size of that column. So the Monte Carlo simulation, we're varying all these factors, and we're generating 10,000 fault plane solutions. one of the interesting things to look at is the juxtaposition area. This gives you an idea of how things are varying. So now we'll look at the leak points and see how that comes through to volumetrics. In many cases, interpreters will take the trap uncertainty, the fault seal, top seal, and charge risk and mix them together. So one of the classic ways of doing this is to say, I don't know how much hydrocarbon I have in this prospect. I know there's a really good chance I'll find some hydrocarbons at the crest, so I'll make that my P100. And it's unlikely to be filled to spill, so I'll make that my P0. So then they guess I've got 90% chance of getting 10% full, I've got a 50% chance of being half full, and a 10% chance of it being 90% full. That gives us an idea of some of the range of fill. So we're mixing together top seal risk, lateral seal risk, and charge risk, and that gives us in the region, in this particular case, of 316 million barrels of BRV. So what fault risk does in realization 1, it goes and calculates the fault seal, calculates the spill point, and calculates the crest. It then says, is this spill point deeper or shallower than the fault? If so, the fault's the controlling factor. Fault risk gets the level that the fault leaks at and the crest, and then calculates the trap volume. So realization 2 might be that it's filled to spill, and so on. So for each of these realizations, fault risk uses depth area pairs to calculate a gross rock or bulk rock volume. So here we see in our classic model of P10, P50, and P90, we've got the BRV of 360 million barrels. So fault risk is looking at two scenarios. It looks at whether the shale gauge ratio works or whether juxtaposition analysis is a key factor. So in here we've got the shale gauge ratio. First, we've got an 82% chance that structures fill to spill, and this gives us a contact and a column and a BRV, given a BRV of 335 million barrels. For the no-seal case, we have only a 41% chance of it being filled to spill and a 60% chance of being constrained by faulting. So if we have it filled to spill, we have a similar contact, column, and BRV as in the classic case, but with the 60% chance of only having a higher contact, a much lower column, and a BRV of only 100 million or 99 million barrels BRV. One of the things that fault risk experts have found analyzing data in 150 different contacts is that interpreters often overestimate the trap column. By taking this rigorous approach, we're making a big improvement on accuracy. So we pretty much know what's going on in this case anyway, because there's an existing dry well that they've drilled at approximately the P50 level. So what this shows is that the dry well, the seal and the optimistic leak point scenarios are not appropriate. So these two cases here are probably not appropriate. And the modelling of showing the 59% chance of a fluid contact at 1766 is probably the best case estimate in this case. So in this case, we've shown that the 99 million barrels is given us a best guess volume. And in this particular case, they're looking at an attic oil potential, which is the red column here. So, the benefits of using fault risk: it improves your mapping and bulk rock volume of prospects. Fault risk is uniquely able to calculate the probability of fault sealing, gives you the trap analysis and seal capacity. If you have any questions about fault risk or this presentation, please feel free to contact either myself or any of my colleagues. Thank you very much.